When I announced my engagement, my family said, "What about me?" The champagne flute froze halfway to my lips when I heard my mother's voice cut through the celebratory chatter at Romano's restaurant. "What about me, Jessica? Don't you think you should have consulted me first before accepting?" The entire table went silent. My fiancé David's hand tightened around mine as 23 pairs of eyes turned toward my mother, Sandra, who was dramatically pressing her manicured fingers against her chest like she'd just been mortally wounded. We'd barely finished announcing our engagement 30 seconds ago, and she was already making it about herself. "Mom, I started, but she was just getting warmed up." "I mean, really, Jessica. March 15th? That's the same weekend as my book club's annual wine retreat to Napa. Do you know how long I've been planning that trip?" 6 months. She turned to David's parents, Jim and Carol, who were sitting there looking like they'd accidentally wandered into a reality show. "She's always been inconsiderate like this." My brother Marcus chose that moment to chime in, setting down his beer with enough force to make the silverware rattle. "Honestly, Jess, don't you think it's a little weird that you're getting married before me? I'm 32. I'm the oldest. Traditionally, shouldn't I be settling down first?" His girlfriend Stephanie shifted uncomfortably beside him, her cheeks turning the same shade of red as the marinara sauce on her untouched pasta. "Marcus," David said carefully, "I don't think birth order determines." "I wasn't talking to you," Marcus snapped. "This is a family discussion." I felt that familiar burning sensation in my chest, the same one I'd experienced at my college graduation when my mother spent the entire dinner complaining about how uncomfortable the auditorium seats were. The same feeling from my promotion celebration last year when Marcus interrupted my toast to announce he was thinking about maybe looking for a new job sometime soon. "We haven't even set a date yet," I said quietly. "I just said March because that's when we're hoping." "Well, you'll need to pick something else," Sandra declared, waving her hand dismissively. "Easter weekend is April 12th this year, and you know how important our family brunch is. And don't even think about May because that's Marcus's birthday month, and we always do something special." David's father Jim cleared his throat. "Congratulations, you two. We're absolutely thrilled." His voice carried a warmth that made my throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "When Carol and I got engaged, we knew we'd found something special. I can see that same happiness in both of you." "Thank you," I managed, but Sandra wasn't finished. "I just think it's incredibly selfish, that's all. I've been dreaming about planning your wedding since you were 5 years old, Jessica. I have Pinterest boards. 17 of them. And now you're just going to steamroll over everything without even asking what I think." The waiter approached our table hesitantly, clearly sensing the tension. "Can I get anyone dessert or?" "We're fine," Marcus said curtly. But we weren't fine. We were the opposite of fine. As I sat there watching my family dissect my engagement like vultures picking apart roadkill, something inside me crystallized. This wasn't going to be my wedding story. This scene right here, my mother's dramatics, my brother's petulance, the way they'd sucked all the joy out of what should have been the happiest moment of my life, this wasn't happening again. Not on the most important day of my life. The drive back to David's apartment was suffocatingly quiet. I stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur past while replaying every excruciating minute of dinner. My phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past 20 minutes, 14 texts from my mother and 6 missed calls from Marcus. "You want to talk about it?" David finally asked as we pulled into his parking garage. "What's there to say? My family just turned our engagement announcement into an episode of Jerry Springer." I laughed, but it came out bitter and hollow. "Your parents probably think they're getting the daughter-in-law from hell." "My parents think you're wonderful," he said firmly, putting the car in park. "My mom texted me while you were in the bathroom. She said, and I quote, 'Now we understand why Jessica is so independent and strong.' Also, is your future mother-in-law always like that?" I groaned and buried my face in my hands. "This is so humiliating." David reached over and gently pulled my hands away from my face. "Hey. Look at me." His green eyes were soft but determined. "What happened tonight? That's not normal, Jess. You know that, right?" I wanted to defend them out of habit, but the words wouldn't come. Because he was right. When David proposed last month during our weekend trip to Vermont, I'd been deliriously happy for exactly 3 days before the dread set in. The dread of having to involve my family in our wedding planning. The dread of my mother taking over every decision. The dread of Marcus finding some way to make our wedding about his perpetual relationship struggles with Stephanie. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my mother, called 3 venues in Napa. 2 have availability in March if you insist on ruining my book club weekend. The least you could do is have a ceremony somewhere nice since I'll be missing my girls' trip. Chateau Margaux has a cancellation for March 22nd. $847 per person minimum. You're welcome, She's already booking venues, I said, showing David the text. We've been engaged for 4 hours and she's already spent $8,000 on a venue I never asked for. David's jaw tightened as he read the message. Did you ask her to do this? Of course not. But this is what she does. She steamrolls over everything and then acts like she's doing me a favor. I scrolled through the other texts, my stomach churning with each one. Found the perfect dress at Kleinfeld. Made you an appointment for next Saturday at 2 p.m. Don't eat before, the consultant says the camera adds 10 pounds. By the way, your father wants to walk you down the aisle, but I think Marcus should do it since he's never been in a wedding before and he's sensitive about these things. Also we need to talk about your guest list. The Hendersons have invited us to 3 weddings this year, so they have to be included. That's just proper etiquette. David, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind that was either brilliant or completely insane. What if we didn't tell them anything else about the wedding? What do you mean? I mean, what if we planned everything ourselves and didn't involve them at all? No input on the venue, the dress, the guest list, nothing. He was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about excluding your family from your wedding planning. I'm talking about having the wedding we want instead of the wedding my mother wants to throw for herself. The more I thought about it, the more the idea took root. She already assumes she's in charge. Marcus thinks he should have some kind of veto power because he's older. When exactly do David and Jessica get a say in David and Jessica's wedding? My phone rang. Sandra's contact photo, a selfie she'd taken at last year's country club charity auction, filled the screen. Don't answer it, David said quietly. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. My mother had apparently spent her entire evening researching wedding vendors, florists, and caterers, sending me screenshots of everything she'd bookmarked for our consideration. At 2:47 a.m., she texted, *, can't sleep thinking about how beautiful you'll look in the Vera one gown I found. $4,200, but it's your special day, *. I was still scrolling through the digital avalanche when David emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a grim expression. Marcus called me, he said, handing me a mug. At 6:30 this morning. What did he want? To have a man-to-man conversation about how you're clearly having some kind of emotional breakdown and need family guidance to make rational decisions. David sat down heavily beside me on the couch. He also wanted to know if I'd talked you into eloping because that would be just like Jessica to take the coward's way out. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. He said that? Among other things. He spent 20 minutes explaining why he should be my best man since he's known you longest and has insights about your personality quirks that my friends wouldn't understand. David rubbed his temples. Jess, he asked me if I was sure I wanted to marry into all this family drama. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What did you say? I told him I wasn't marrying your family. I was marrying you. His voice was steady, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. Then he said something about how marriage means joining families, and I needed to be prepared for the Jessica experience, whatever the hell that means. My phone rang again. This time it was my father, which was unusual since Dad typically stayed out of family drama unless specifically drafted by my mother. Hi, Dad. Jessica, sweetheart. His voice sounded tired. Your mother has been up since 5 a.m. calling every venue within 100 miles. She's already put down 3 deposits. She what? She said she was securing our options. The woman at Riverside Manor told her that March bookings go fast, so she gave them her credit card to hold the date. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. She's also scheduled appointments for you at 4 different dress shops this weekend and called your Aunt Linda in Phoenix to discuss flying in for the engagement party. Dad, we never said anything about an engagement party. Well, your mother seems to think it's essential. She's looking at the country club for next month. Says we need to do it before David's family starts planning something less appropriate. He paused. She also wants to know if David's parents have money, because if they do, tradition dictates they should pay for the rehearsal dinner, and she wants to make sure it's somewhere nice enough to reflect well on our family. I looked at David, who was watching my face with growing concern. Dad, I need you to tell Mom to cancel everything. We haven't made any decisions yet. Honey, you know how she gets when she's excited about something. Maybe just let her have this one thing? She's been talking about your wedding since you were in middle school. That's exactly the problem, Dad. This is my wedding, not Mom's fantasy fulfillment project. The line went quiet for several seconds. When my father spoke again, his voice had that careful, diplomatic tone he used when he was trying to manage my mother's reactions. Jessica, I think you should consider whether this is really the hill you want to die on. Family harmony is important, especially when you're starting a new chapter of your life. After I hung up, David and I sat in silence for a long time. Outside our window, couples were walking their dogs and grabbing coffee, living their normal, uncomplicated Saturday morning lives. They're not going to stop, I said finally. No, David agreed quietly. They're not. That afternoon, while David was at his weekly basketball game, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to my childhood home unannounced. I needed to see if there was any part of my mother that could understand why her behavior was pushing me away. I found her in the dining room, surrounded by wedding magazines, fabric samples, and 3 laptops displaying different vendor websites. She transformed our old family eating space into mission control for Operation Jessica's wedding. Oh good, you're here, she said without looking up from a spreadsheet titled Vendor Comparison Matrix. I've narrowed the photographers down to 5 options, but we need to book consultations this week. The good ones get snatched up 18 months in advance. Mom, we just got engaged yesterday. Which is exactly why we can't waste time. She held up 2 invitation samples. Classic ivory with gold foil embossing, or modern white with letterpress? I'm leaning toward the ivory because it photographs better, and these will definitely end up in our family album. I sat down across from her, pushing aside a stack of catering menus. Can we talk for a minute? Of course. I have so much to show you. She grabbed a thick binder labeled Jessica's Dream Wedding in ornate gold letters. I've been working on this for years, updating it whenever I saw something perfect for you. Look at this centerpiece idea, white roses with eucalyptus, very elegant but not too flashy. The binder was at least 4 inches thick. I flipped through pages of venue photos, dress clippings, menu suggestions, and color palette options. Everything was meticulously organized with sticky notes in her handwriting, perfect for Jessica, and this screams sophisticated bride. Mom, this is a lot. It's thorough, she corrected. Do you know how many brides would kill to have this kind of preparation? Your cousin Amy threw together her whole wedding in 6 months, and you could tell. The flowers clashed with the bridesmaids' dresses, and don't even get me started on that cheap DJ. I took a deep breath. What if David and I wanted to plan something smaller? More intimate? Her hand stilled on the binder. Smaller how? Maybe just close family and friends. 50 people instead of 200. 50 people? She looked at me like I'd suggested we hold the ceremony in a gas station bathroom. Jessica, we have 37 people just on our Christmas card list that we'd have to invite. That's not including your father's business associates, my book club, the neighbors. Mom, those aren't the people we want to celebrate with. Want has nothing to do with it. These are social obligations. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. I already texted Mrs. Henderson that you were engaged. She congratulated me on finally getting you married off and asked when the save the dates would go out. You told the Hendersons before David's parents even got home? I was excited. Sue me for being proud of my daughter. She set down her phone with a sharp tap. Besides, Helen Henderson has been bragging about her daughter's promotion for months. It felt good to have something to share. I stared at her, realizing that my engagement wasn't about my happiness, it was about her social currency. I also called your Aunt Carol in Denver, she continued, oblivious to my expression. She's already looking at flights. And your cousin Brett wants to know if he can bring his new girlfriend. I told him probably not since we don't know her well enough, but family comes first. My phone buzzed with a text from David, how's it going? I typed back, asterisk worse than expected. She's invited half of Colorado, asterisk. Who are you texting? Mom asked, craning her neck to see my phone. David. Good. I have questions for him about his guest list. His parents seem nice enough, but I need to know numbers so I can book the right size venue. Also, what's his budget situation? Because if we're doing this properly, there are certain standards we need to maintain. That's when I knew there was no reasoning with her. In her mind, she wasn't taking over my wedding, she was saving it for my poor judgment. I spent the rest of Saturday trapped in wedding planning hell. Mom had scheduled back-to-back venue tours without consulting me, starting with a country club at 2 p.m. and ending with some overpriced botanical garden at 6:30. Between locations, she peppered me with questions about David's family's financial situation and whether his parents would step up appropriately for their traditional responsibilities. I need to know if they're contributing meaningfully, she said as we drove to the third venue. Because if they expect us to carry the full financial load while they just show up and smile, that's not happening. Your father and I have standards. At Willowbrook Gardens, the wedding coordinator, a patient woman named Patricia who'd clearly dealt with difficult mothers before, walked us through their premium package while Mom took notes and asked increasingly invasive questions. What's your policy on outside decorators? Mom asked. I have very specific vision for the centerpieces. We're quite flexible, Patricia replied diplomatically. Many families like to personalize. And what about catering restrictions? I assume you can accommodate special dietary needs? David's mother mentioned she's watching her sodium intake, and we can't have her feeling excluded. I caught Patricia's questioning glance. Actually, Carol never said anything about. She's just being polite, Mom interrupted. I can tell these things. It's a mother's intuition. By 7 p.m., I was emotionally drained and Mom was energized like she'd mainlined espresso. She'd taken photos of every venue, collected business cards from 6 vendors, and scheduled 4 follow-up appointments for the upcoming week. This is so exciting, she gushed as we sat in her car outside the last venue. I feel like I'm finally getting to do all the things I never got to experience with my own wedding. Your father and I had such a small ceremony, his choice, obviously, and I've always regretted not going bigger. That comment hit me like a slap. So this is about your regrets? Don't be silly. This is about giving you everything you deserve. She pulled out her phone to review the photos she'd taken. Although I will admit, I'm living vicariously a little bit. Is that so wrong? I never got the fairy tale experience. When I got home that night, David was waiting with Thai takeout and a concerned expression. Your brother stopped by while you were out, he said, setting containers of pad Thai on the coffee table. Marcus came here? How did he even get past the front desk? He told them he was your brother and it was a family emergency. David's voice was carefully neutral. He wanted to discuss our wedding timeline and his role in the ceremony. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. What did he say? He thinks we should wait until next fall. Give him time to propose to Stephanie so they can have a double wedding. David handed me chopsticks, watching my face carefully. He said it would be more economical for the family and less awkward socially. A double wedding? The pad Thai suddenly tasted like cardboard. He wants to share our wedding? He also had some thoughts about the best man situation. Apparently he's already told his friends he'd be standing up for you, and it would be embarrassing if I chose someone else. I set down my food, my appetite completely gone. David, he's never even been supportive of our relationship. Last Christmas he told me you seemed too good to be true and I should manage my expectations. He mentioned that conversation actually. Said he was just being protective and now that he's gotten to know me better, he approves of the match. David's jaw tightened slightly. He kept calling it giving his blessing like I needed his permission to marry you. My phone rang, Mom again. I let it go to voicemail, but she immediately called back. She's called 8 times since you left, David said. On the 3rd ring cycle, I finally answered. Hi, Mom. Jessica. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. I had the most wonderful idea during my bath. Her voice was breathless with excitement. What if we did the engagement party on Valentine's Day? It's perfectly romantic, and it gives us 6 weeks to plan something really spectacular. I already called the country club and they have availability if we book the grand ballroom by Monday. The grand ballroom held 300 people. Mom, we don't want an engagement party. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you do. Every engaged couple has an engagement party, Jessica. It's how you properly announce your intentions to the community. I could hear papers rustling in the background. I've already started the guest list. Between our family friends, your father's colleagues, the book club ladies, and the country club set, we're looking at about 200 people minimum. 200 people? David's eyes widened from across the couch. Mom, we barely know 200 people combined. That's not the point, sweetheart. This is about making connections, building relationships. The Weatherbees threw an engagement party for their daughter last spring and it was featured in the society pages. 3 full-color photos. Her voice took on that dreamy quality she got when discussing social status. Mrs. Patterson still talks about how elegant everything looked. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. We haven't even set a wedding date yet. Which is exactly why the engagement party is so important. It gives us a chance to feel out people's availability, see who's serious about attending the wedding itself. She paused, and I could hear her flipping through what sounded like a magazine. I found the most darling invitations at Papyrus today. Cream cardstock with rose gold foil, very sophisticated. They're $47 for a set of 25, which is actually quite reasonable for the quality. I did quick math in my head. 200 invitations would cost almost $400, and that was just for engagement party invitations we didn't want for a party we'd never asked for. Mom, please don't order anything else without talking to us first. Oh, that reminds me. I spoke with Father Mackenzie at St. Augustine's about wedding dates. March 15th is available, but he wants to meet with you both for pre-marriage counseling. I scheduled your first session for this Thursday at 7 p.m. My stomach dropped. You scheduled what? Pre-Kana classes, dear. It's required for all Catholic weddings. Don't worry, Father Mackenzie is very progressive. He only requires 6 sessions instead of the traditional 8. She sounded pleased with herself for negotiating this bargain. I also put down a deposit to hold the church. $500, but it's refundable if you change your mind within 30 days. David was staring at me with an expression somewhere between disbelief and horror. Mom, we never said we wanted to get married at St. Augustine's. Where else would you get married? It's your family church. You were baptized there, confirmed there. Some traditions matter, Jessica. I haven't been to Mass in 3 years. All the more reason to reconnect with your faith before making such an important commitment. Her tone turned slightly defensive. Besides, David's family will expect a proper church ceremony. What would they think if we suggested some generic venue with no spiritual significance? After I hung up, following another 20 minutes of listening to her detailed vision for my spiritual reawakening, David and I sat in stunned silence. She spent $500 today, I said finally. Without asking us. On a church you don't want to get married in. For a religion I don't practice anymore. After scheduling counseling sessions with a priest neither of us has met. I pulled up my banking app and checked my mother's activity from our joint savings account, the one we'd opened when I was 16 for college expenses and never closed. In the past 24 hours, she'd made 7 different deposits to wedding vendors, totaling over $2,000. David, I said quietly, showing him the screen. She's not planning to ask permission. She's already planning our entire wedding. The revelation about the joint bank account hit me like ice water. I stared at the transactions scrolling down my phone screen. Riverside Manor deposit, $750, Willowbrook Gardens consultation fee, $200, St. Augustine's Church deposit, $500. Each charge felt like another brick in a wall that was slowly boxing me in. She's been planning this for 24 hours and she's already committed us to $3,000 in expenses, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. David, what happens when she finds out we don't want any of these things? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, *, talk to Mom. Sounds like you're having second thoughts about the church wedding. Just remember that Grandma Rose would roll over in her grave if you got married outside the faith. Some things are bigger than your personal preferences, *. I showed David the message, watching his expression darken. When did your family decide they get to vote on our life decisions? He asked. Apparently the moment I said yes to your proposal. I scrolled through my mom's other transactions from the day. Look at this, she hired a wedding planner. $250 for an initial consultation with someone named Vivian Cross on Monday morning. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number with a local area code. Hello? Jessica? This is Vivian Cross from Elegant Affairs Wedding Planning. Your mother gave me your number after our lovely conversation this morning. The woman's voice was professionally cheerful but slightly confused. I wanted to touch base about our consultation on Monday. Sandra mentioned you're planning a March wedding, but some of the timeline details she provided seem ambitious. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. Ms. Cross, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't hire a wedding planner. Oh. There was a pause. Your mother was very specific about wanting to secure my services before someone else booked your date. She put down a retainer and everything. How much of a retainer? $500. Standard for our premium package consultation. Vivian's voice became more cautious. She also mentioned you'd need help managing some family dynamics around the planning process. Something about coordinating with multiple strong personalities? I closed my eyes, mortified that my mother was already discussing our family dynamics with complete strangers. Ms. Cross, I'm going to need to call you back. There are some things I need to sort out with my family first. After I hung up, David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Jess, she hired a wedding planner to manage us. She hired a wedding planner to manage the family she created the problems with in the first place. I pulled up my banking app again, documenting each unauthorized charge. She spent $3,200 in one day, and we don't want any of it. Have you considered removing her access to that account? I had, but something about that felt nuclear. Like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. That account has been joint since I was in high school. If I remove her now, she'll know I'm actively working against her plans. As opposed to what? Letting her spend your savings on a wedding you don't want. My phone lit up with another call, this time from my dad. Hi, Dad. Jessica, we need to talk. His voice was strained. Your mother has been on the phone all evening with vendors, and she's starting to make commitments that are getting expensive. I know. I can see the bank account. She hired a caterer, he said quietly. Put down a $1,500 deposit at Chez Laurent for a tasting menu next weekend. The full catering package she's considering runs $43,000. My blood went cold. $43,000? For 200 guests with an open bar and premium menu selections. She's also looking at photographers in the $8,000 range because anything less would be cutting corners on memories. David was watching my face with growing alarm as I repeated the numbers. Dad, you have to make her stop. I tried. She said this is a once-in-a-lifetime event and we can't let budget constraints compromise your special day. He sighed heavily. She's already called your Aunt Linda about bridesmaid dress shopping and your cousin Michelle about being the maid of honor. She picked my maid of honor? She said Michelle needs something positive in her life after her divorce, and having a role in your wedding would boost her self-esteem. Papers rustled in the background. Jessica, your mother has transformed the guest room into wedding headquarters. She's got vendor contracts spread across the bed, fabric samples pinned to the walls, and she's scheduled 12 appointments for next week alone. I looked at David, whose face had gone pale. Dad, I need you to understand something. We never asked for any of this. I know, sweetheart. But your mother is so excited, and she's put so much work into this already. Maybe you could just go along with some of it? Pick your battles? There it was again, the family solution to my mother's behavior. Don't confront it, don't establish boundaries, just pick your battles and let her steamroll over everything that wasn't worth fighting about. The problem was, she'd already decided nothing was worth me fighting about. The breaking point came at 11:47 p.m. when my phone rang for the 15th time that day. This time it wasn't my mother, it was Michelle, my cousin in Atlanta, calling to squeal about being chosen as my maid of honor. Jessica. Oh my god, I'm so excited. Michelle's voice was bright with genuine happiness. Aunt Sandra called and told me everything. I already started looking at dresses online, and I found the most gorgeous bridesmaid options. There's this dusty rose color that would look amazing with your complexion. My heart sank. Michelle had been through a brutal divorce 6 months ago, and this was the most enthusiastic I'd heard her sound since her ex-husband moved out. Michelle, I know what you're thinking, Atlanta to wherever you're having the wedding is expensive. But don't worry about my travel costs. This is so much more important than money. Her voice caught slightly. After everything that's happened this year, being part of something beautiful and hopeful, it means everything to me, Jess. David was watching my face, and I could see the exact moment he understood my dilemma. My mother hadn't just spent money I could get back or made reservations I could cancel. She'd told people I loved that they were important parts of my wedding. She'd given my heartbroken cousin something to look forward to. She turned her unauthorized planning into emotional leverage. Aunt Sandra said you're doing a March wedding, which is perfect timing because I'll be done with my certification program by then. I'm actually thinking about driving up early to help with last-minute details. It'll be like the old days when we used to plan elaborate tea parties for our dolls, remember? I remembered. Michelle and I had spent countless summers creating elaborate fantasy weddings for our Barbies, complete with tissue paper trains and flower petal confetti. She'd always been the one who cared about romance and fairy tale endings, while I'd been more interested in building the furniture for the dollhouse. Michelle, can I call you back tomorrow? I'm still processing everything. Of course. I'm just so happy for you. And honestly, having something positive to focus on is exactly what I needed right now. Aunt Sandra said you're planning something really elegant. I can't wait to be part of it. After I hung up, David and I sat in heavy silence. Outside our apartment, the city hummed with late-night activity, but inside felt suffocatingly quiet. She's not just planning your wedding, David said finally. She's making it impossible for you to take back control without hurting people you care about. My phone buzzed with a text from my Aunt Linda in Phoenix. * booked my flight. March 14th to 17th. So proud of you, honey. Your mom says you need help with wedding prep, so I'm coming early to assist. Haven't been this excited about a family event in years. *. Then another from my dad's business partner. * Congratulations. Sandra mentioned you're getting married at St. Augustine's. Beautiful church. My wife and I look forward to celebrating with you. *. And another from my high school best friend Sarah. * Your mom found me on Facebook and told me about your engagement. I'm so happy for you. She said you're planning something big and beautiful for March. Can't wait to catch up at the wedding. *. David, I said, staring at the messages she's told everyone. My entire extended family friends, people I haven't talked to in years. They're all making plans based on her version of our wedding. He leaned forward, running his hands through his hair. How many people do you think she's contacted? I started counting on my fingers. Michelle, Aunt Linda, my dad's colleagues, the family friends, my mother's book club, our former neighbors. Maybe 50 people? Maybe more? In 2 days. In 2 days, I confirmed, feeling sick. And they're all excited about a wedding that doesn't exist for a couple that just wanted to get married quietly somewhere beautiful. My phone rang again, another unknown local number. This is probably another vendor she hired, I said, declining the call. But they called right back, so I answered. Is this Jessica Martinez? The voice was professional but apologetic. Yes. This is Tom Chen from Signature Photography. Your mother contacted me about shooting your March wedding. I wanted to discuss package options, but I'm getting some conflicting information about your venue and guest count. Could we schedule a time to meet this week and sort out the details? I looked at David, who was shaking his head slowly. Mr. Chen, I'm going to have to call you back. There are some planning details we need to finalize first. Of course. But just so you know, March bookings are filling up fast. If you want to secure our premium package, we'll need a deposit by Friday. Another deposit. Another deadline. Another piece of my mother's elaborate trap clicking into place. After I hung up with the photographer, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything, every vendor my mother had contacted, every deposit she'd made, every person she'd told about our wedding plans. The list grew longer and more expensive with each entry. David watched me work, occasionally handing me my phone when it buzzed with yet another congratulatory text from someone I barely remembered giving my number to. Jess, he said quietly after I'd been typing for 20 minutes, what are you thinking? I saved the document and turned to face him. I'm thinking that if my mother wants to plan a wedding so badly, she can plan one. Just not ours. His eyebrows rose. Meaning? Meaning what if we let her keep making all these arrangements while we quietly plan something completely different? The idea was crystallizing as I spoke. She's so busy steamrolling over us that she's not actually paying attention to what we want. What if we use that to our advantage? Before David could respond, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, and her voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Jessica. I've had the most wonderful breakthrough. I was talking to Vivian, that's your wedding planner, dear, and she suggested we think bigger. March 15th might be too rushed for the kind of elegant affair we're envisioning. My stomach dropped. Mom, what does think bigger mean? Well, if we push the wedding to June, we could book the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton. Vivian knows the events manager personally, and she thinks she could get us a Saturday evening slot. Papers rustled excitedly in the background. Picture this, cathedral ceiling, crystal chandeliers, space for 300 guests minimum. It would be absolutely magical. 300 guests? I know it sounds like a lot, but once you start counting properly, both families, family friends, your father's business contacts, my social circle, college friends, work colleagues, the numbers add up quickly. Vivian says anything under 200 looks sparse in a room that size. David was staring at me with an expression that perfectly captured my own feelings. We'd somehow gone from announcing our engagement to being passengers on my mother's runaway wedding freight train. And the best part, Mom continued, is that a June wedding gives us time to do everything properly. Engagement party in March, bridal shower in April, bachelor and bachelorette parties in May. The whole traditional timeline. Mom, slow down. We haven't agreed to any of this. Oh, sweetheart, I know it's overwhelming. That's exactly why I hired Vivian to help coordinate everything. She's already started reaching out to premium vendors, the kind that book up 18 months in advance. Her voice took on that breathless quality that meant she was about to spend more money. The florist she recommends did the Morrison wedding last fall. You remember, it was featured in that bridal magazine I showed you. $60,000 in flowers alone, but the photos were absolutely stunning. $60,000. In flowers. For one day. I looked at David, who had gone slightly pale, and made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 3 days ago. Mom, that sounds lovely. You should definitely book a consultation with the florist. David's head snapped up, his eyes wide with confusion. But I kept going. And the Ritz-Carlton sounds perfect. Very elegant. Very, you. I injected enthusiasm into my voice that I absolutely didn't feel. Why don't you go ahead and put down a deposit to hold the date? We wouldn't want to lose out on something so special. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was suspicious. Really? You're not going to fight me on the venue? Why would I fight you on giving us the wedding of your dreams? The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While David made coffee, I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop, creating what I privately called the real wedding plan, a document hidden in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2019 where my mother would never think to look. Real guest list, 47 people. Real venue budget, $3,000 maximum. Real timeline, small ceremony in 8 weeks. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom at 7:23 a.m., * meeting with Ritz-Carlton events coordinator at 2 p.m. today. Bringing Vivian and your father. The deposit is $5,000 but it includes a champagne tasting, *. I typed back, * sounds wonderful. Can't wait to hear all about it, *. You're really doing this, David said, reading over my shoulder as he set down my coffee mug. I'm really doing this. I opened a new browser tab and searched for small venues within driving distance. While she's planning the Martinez family wedding extravaganza, we're planning our actual wedding. And what happens when she finds out? She finds out after it's too late for her to change anything. I clicked on a listing for a small inn in Vermont with a rustic barn that could hold 50 people. Look at this place, Maple Grove Inn. They have weekend availability in April, and their wedding package is $2,800 including catering. David leaned over to study the photos, exposed wooden beams, string lights, mountain views through tall windows. It's perfect, he said quietly. It's exactly what we talked about wanting. I called the inn while David got ready for work, speaking quietly even though my mother was presumably 20 miles away at her own house. Maple Grove Inn, this is Rebecca. Hi, I'm calling about your wedding packages. Do you have availability for a Saturday in April? We do. April 18th and 25th are both open. Our spring package includes the ceremony space, reception dinner for up to 50 guests, and overnight accommodations for the couple. Rebecca's voice was warm and unpretentious, the complete opposite of every vendor my mother had contacted. Would you like to schedule a visit? Yes, but I need to ask about something unusual. Would it be possible to keep our reservation confidential? We're dealing with some complicated family dynamics. Rebecca paused for just a moment. Honey, you'd be surprised how often we get that request. Family weddings can bring out the worst in people. We're very discreet here. I scheduled a visit for the upcoming Saturday, using David's phone number as the primary contact and paying the deposit from my personal checking account, the one my mother had never had access to. After David left for work, I continued my secret planning. I found a photographer in Vermont who specialized in intimate ceremonies, $1,200 for 6 hours instead of the $8,000 packages my mother was considering. I researched a small local florist who could do simple bouquets and centerpieces for under $500. By 10 a.m., I had a complete alternative wedding planned for less than what my mother had spent on deposits in the past 3 days. Then my phone rang with a call that made my stomach drop. It was my boss, Janet. Jessica, I just got the strangest call from someone claiming to be your mother. She was asking about your vacation time for wedding planning appointments and something about needing Fridays off for the next 6 weeks. Janet sounded confused and slightly annoyed. She also wanted to know if the office would be interested in placing a group order for wedding favors from some company she's representing. My face burned with embarrassment. Janet, I'm so sorry. I never asked her to call you, and I don't need Fridays off. She seemed very intense. She kept mentioning how important it was that your workplace be supportive during this crucial life transition and asked if we'd be contributing to an office wedding gift. She also wanted our office address to send save the dates. Oh my God. I pressed my hand to my forehead. She's sending save the dates to my coworkers? She said something about maintaining professional relationships and making sure everyone felt included in your joy. Janet's voice softened slightly. Jessica, is everything okay at home? This seemed like some pretty intense family involvement. After I hung up with Janet, having assured her multiple times that I didn't need special accommodations and would handle the family situation, I realized my mother had escalated beyond just planning my wedding. She was now managing my professional relationships too. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Mom says you agreed to the Ritz-Carlton. Smart choice. I told Stephanie we should start looking at venues too since we'll probably get engaged soon. Makes sense to coordinate our wedding so the family doesn't get overwhelmed. Then another message. By the way, talked to David's brother Mike last night. Interesting guy. He had some questions about the wedding timeline that I helped clarify. I stared at that message, my blood running cold. Marcus had contacted David's family without telling us. I immediately called David at work. My brother called your brother, I said without preamble when he answered. What? When? Last night, apparently. He helped clarify our wedding timeline. I was pacing around our living room, agitated energy coursing through me. David, they're not just planning our wedding. They're managing our relationships with your family too. What did Marcus tell Mike? I don't know, but Mike must have had questions about timing or details, which means your family is confused about what we actually want. I stopped pacing, a terrible thought occurring to me. What if your parents think we're the ones who want this massive expensive wedding? What if they think we expect them to contribute thousands of dollars to match my mother's spending? David was quiet for a moment. I'll call Mike during lunch and find out what Marcus said. And I'll call your parents tonight to do damage control. I sank onto our couch, overwhelmed by how quickly this was spiraling. We've been engaged for 3 days, and my family has already contacted my workplace, your brother, and probably half our mutual friends. Jess, David said gently, maybe it's time to stop this before it gets worse. But I wasn't ready to stop it. I was ready to disappear entirely. That afternoon, while secretly researching elopement packages in Vermont, I got a call that made my blood freeze. Jessica? This is Carol Martinez from David's office. The voice was friendly but confused. I think there might be some mix-up about wedding planning responsibilities. My heart stopped. Carol Martinez, David's coworker, not his mother. What do you mean? Well, someone claiming to be your mother called our office this morning asking about David's vacation schedule and whether we'd received our wedding invitation yet. She also wanted to know if our company does group gifts for employee weddings because she's coordinating something called a wish list registry at 4 different stores. I closed my eyes, mortification washing over me. Carol, I am so sorry. We never asked her to contact David's workplace. She seemed very thorough. She asked about David's salary range because she wanted to make sure the bachelor party plans were financially appropriate for his income level. Carol's voice grew more concerned. Jessica, she also asked for the contact information of David's college friends. Said she was coordinating with the best man about party planning. The best man? My voice came out strangled. We haven't chosen a best man. Oh. Well, she seemed very confident that someone named Marcus was handling those arrangements. She asked me to pass along his number to anyone who called asking about bachelor party details. After I hung up, I immediately tried calling David, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried Marcus. Hey, Jess. His voice was cheerful, completely oblivious to my panic. Great timing. I just got off the phone with David's friend Chris about bachelor party logistics. Marcus, what the hell are you doing? Relax. Mom gave me David's LinkedIn contacts, and I've been reaching out to coordinate the guys' weekend. Chris seems cool, he suggested Vegas, but I explained that Atlantic City would be more budget-friendly for everyone involved. Papers rustled in the background. I'm thinking the weekend before the wedding. That gives everyone time to recover before the ceremony. You contacted David's friends without asking us? Someone has to handle the details, Jess. You and David are obviously overwhelmed with all the wedding planning. This is what family does, we step up and take care of the logistics. His tone turned slightly condescending. Besides, David's friends seem nice, but they don't really understand how these things work. Chris was talking about just doing a dinner and some drinks. That's not a bachelor party, that's a Tuesday night. I was gripping my phone so hard my knuckles had turned white. Marcus, David might not even want a bachelor party. Every guy wants a bachelor party. They just don't always know how to organize one properly. He sounded pleased with himself. I already found a great hotel package, 2 nights, 3 days, includes golf and a group dinner at a steakhouse. Only $400 per person. $400 per person? That's actually really reasonable for Atlantic City. I got quotes for Vegas and we were looking at $800 minimum. He paused. I told the guys they could Venmo me deposits to hold the reservations. Chris already sent his share. David's friend Chris, his quiet, thoughtful college roommate who worked as a librarian, had just been pressured into paying $400 for a bachelor party weekend he'd never agreed to attend. Marcus, you need to cancel everything right now. I'm not canceling anything. This is going to be awesome. His voice took on that stubborn tone I remembered from childhood arguments. Look, I know you're stressed about wedding planning, but this is one less thing you have to worry about. I've got the bachelor party completely handled. My phone beeped with an incoming call, David, finally calling me back. Marcus, I have to go. Wait. One more thing. I need David's dad's phone number. I want to coordinate with him about paying for the rehearsal dinner. Mom says it's traditional for the groom's parents to handle that expense, but we should probably give them some guidance about appropriate venues and guest count expectations. Absolutely not. Jess, someone needs to manage these conversations. We can't just hope David's parents figure out proper wedding etiquette on their own. I hung up on him and immediately answered David's call. My brother booked your bachelor party, I said without preamble. He what? Atlantic City. 2 nights. $400 per person. Your friend Chris already paid. The silence on David's end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. David? I'm here. I'm just processing the fact that your family has now taken over my friendships and my coworker relationships in addition to our wedding. His voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. Chris texted me an hour ago asking if I was excited about Atlantic City. I had no idea what he was talking about. When David got home that evening, we sat at our kitchen table surrounded by 2 completely different wedding realities. On my laptop screen, Maple Grove Inn's cozy barn with string lights and mountain views, $2,800 total cost. On my phone, 17 new text messages from vendors my mother had contacted, asking about timeline confirmations and additional deposits. Rebecca from the inn called me back, David said, checking his voicemails. She wanted to confirm our visit this Saturday and mentioned they could do a small ceremony for just immediate family if we preferred. She sounded really understanding about the family situation. I smiled for what felt like the first time in days. What did you tell her? That we'd love to keep it small and intimate. He sat down across from me, loosening his tie. Then I got a call from my dad asking if we needed help paying for a $60,000 flower budget because Marcus told him that's what your family was expecting. My stomach dropped. Oh no. Dad was trying to be supportive, but I could hear the panic in his voice. He kept saying they wanted to contribute meaningfully but weren't sure how to match that kind of spending. David rubbed his temples. I had to explain that we never asked for $60,000 in flowers and had no idea Marcus was discussing budgets with my parents. What did your dad say? He was relieved, but also confused. He asked if there were two different weddings being planned because the information from your family didn't match anything we'd ever talked about with them. David pulled out his phone and showed me a text from his mother. Look at this. The message read, *Honey, Marcus sent me a link to something called a knot where he's tracking wedding planning progress. It shows you're registered for gifts at 4 different stores and need RSVPs for 300 people by next Friday. Are we missing important deadlines? He made us a wedding website? I stared at the message in horror. Without telling us? David nodded grimly. Complete with our engagement story, which he apparently rewrote to include details about how he helped guide our relationship and knew we were perfect for each other from the beginning. There's also a section about wedding party responsibilities with him listed as best man and your cousin Michelle as maid of honor. I grabbed his phone and clicked the link. Sure enough, there was our faces on a professionally designed wedding website with the heading Jessica and David, a love story guided by family. The color scheme was dusty rose and gold, exactly what my mother had been obsessing over. The registry section showed items ranging from a $400 stand mixer to a $1,200 china set. David, look at this guest list section. I scrolled down, my horror growing. He's got people RSVPing that I haven't spoken to since high school. Mrs. Patterson from my mother's book club RSVP'd yes and added a note asking about dietary restrictions. There's more. David took his phone back and scrolled to another section. He put together a timeline showing the engagement party next month, bridal shower in April, bachelor and bachelorette parties in May, and the wedding in June. Everything's color-coded and cross-referenced with vendor contact information. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Linda calling from Phoenix. Jessica. I just saw the beautiful website Marcus made. That boy is so organized. Her voice was warm with genuine excitement. I already RSVP'd yes and booked my hotel room at that lovely place he recommended. The Ritz-Carlton looks absolutely gorgeous, honey. I met David's eyes across the table, both of us realizing the same thing simultaneously. This had moved far beyond our family's wishful thinking. People were making actual travel plans, spending actual money, taking time off work. Marcus and my mother had created a fully functional alternate reality where their version of our wedding was already happening. Aunt Linda, can I ask you something? When did you first hear about our wedding plans? Oh, your mother called me the day after you got engaged. She was so excited, talking about how you'd always dreamed of a big church wedding and wanted all the family traditions. Linda's voice grew softer. She said you specifically asked for me to be involved because family was so important to you both. It really touched my heart, Jessica. Especially after everything with Uncle Robert's health scare last year. After I hung up, promising to call Aunt Linda back soon, David and I sat in stunned silence. My throat felt tight with the weight of disappointing people I genuinely loved based on promises I'd never made. They're not just planning a wedding, I said quietly. They've created an entire mythology where we're the kind of people who want all of this, and now our families believe it. The breaking point came Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. when my doorbell rang. I stumbled to the intercom in my pajamas, expecting a delivery, but instead heard my mother's voice crackling through the speaker. Jessica, honey, let me up. I brought coffee and croissants from that little French place you like. David was still asleep, and I briefly considered pretending I wasn't home. But ignoring my mother had never worked before, and it certainly wouldn't work now when she was standing in my building's lobby with pastries. She swept into our apartment like a hurricane in designer athleisure, carrying 2 coffee cups and a white bakery box tied with ribbon. Behind her came someone I'd never seen before, a tall woman with perfectly styled silver hair and a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. Jessica, meet Vivian Cross, your wedding planner. Mom announced, setting the coffee on our kitchen counter. I know it's early, but Vivian had a cancellation this morning, and I thought it would be perfect for you two to finally meet properly. Vivian stepped forward with a professionally warm smile. Jessica, it's so lovely to meet you in person. Your mother has told me wonderful things about your vision for the ceremony. I stood there in my rumpled pajamas and messy hair, acutely aware that this poised woman probably charged more per hour than I made in a day. I'm sorry, but what exactly did she tell you about my vision? Well, the June timeline gives us excellent flexibility for vendor selection, Vivian said, opening her portfolio on our coffee table. Your mother mentioned you're particularly interested in incorporating family traditions, the church ceremony, the formal reception, the multi-generational guest list. It's refreshing to work with a bride who values legacy. David emerged from our bedroom, hair sticking up at odd angles, wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt that read Vermont or bust, an ironic choice given our current situation. David. Perfect timing, Mom said brightly. Vivian wanted to discuss the groom's responsibilities in the planning process. At 7 in the morning? David's voice was hoarse with sleep and barely concealed irritation. The early bird catches the worm, Vivian said with practiced cheer. I find that morning meetings help couples stay focused before the day's distractions set in. Now, I prepared a preliminary timeline based on your mother's input, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the bachelor party coordination. She pulled out a laminated chart that looked like something NASA might use to plan a rocket launch. Every week from now until June was color-coded with different planning phases, venue finalization, dress selection, menu tasting, floral design. This is very thorough, David said diplomatically, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching. Your brother Marcus has been incredibly helpful, Vivian continued. He's already coordinated with the groomsmen about tuxedo fittings and provided contact information for your college friends. Such initiative. Most grooms' families need much more guidance. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Sarah in California. Your mom found my Instagram and DM'd me about being a bridesmaid. So honored. Already looking at flights for the dress shopping weekend she mentioned. This is so exciting, I stared at the message, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Sarah lived in San Diego, worked 3 jobs to pay off student loans, and apparently my mother had just volunteered her for an expensive cross-country bridesmaid commitment. Mom, I said carefully, when did you contact Sarah? Oh, yesterday evening. I made a list of all your close friends from your Facebook page and reached out to the ones who should obviously be in the wedding party. She beamed like she'd solved world hunger. Sarah was so sweet, she said she'd be honored to be one of your bridesmaids. I also contacted Amy from college and that lovely girl you worked with at your old job, Rachel. 3 bridesmaids I'd never asked for, all of whom were probably already planning expensive trips to participate in a wedding that existed only in my mother's imagination. Vivian was watching this exchange with growing interest, her professional smile becoming slightly strained. Perhaps we should schedule a separate consultation with just the bride and groom to discuss personal preferences? Nonsense, Mom waved her hand dismissively. Jessica and I discuss everything. We're very close. Besides, she's been so overwhelmed with work lately, I'm happy to handle the preliminary details. That's when I realized my mother genuinely believed she was helping. In her mind, she wasn't steamrolling over my wishes, she was rescuing me from the burden of planning a wedding I was clearly too incompetent to organize myself. Vivian was flipping through her portfolio when she paused, a small frown creasing her professionally smooth forehead. I do have one question about logistics. The Ritz-Carlton coordinator mentioned some confusion about your ceremony location. The church deposit receipt shows St. Augustine's, but the reception venue is 15 miles away. That's going to create transportation challenges for 300 guests. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. What do you mean transportation challenges? Well, typically we arrange shuttle service between ceremony and reception venues, but with that distance and guest count, we're looking at renting 4 buses minimum. That adds roughly $1,200 to your transportation budget. Vivian consulted her notes. Unless some guests are planning to drive themselves, but then we need to coordinate parking at both locations, which the Ritz mentioned might be limited on June weekends. I watched my mother's face cycle through confusion, then calculation, then that familiar look of irritation she got when reality interfered with her plans. Surely the venues can work something out, Mom said dismissively. This is exactly why we hired you, Vivian, to handle these logistical details. Of course, but I wanted to confirm the transportation budget before reaching out to shuttle companies. We're looking at about $4,000 total for round-trip service. Vivian made a note in her portfolio. I assume that's within your overall budget parameters? David was staring at me with wide eyes. $4,000 just to move people between locations for a wedding we didn't want at venues we'd never chosen. Mom, I said slowly, maybe we should reconsider having the ceremony and reception at the same location. Absolutely not. Her voice took on that steel edge that meant she was digging in her heels. St. Augustine's is our family church, and the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom is the only reception venue in the city elegant enough for this kind of celebration. I'm not compromising on quality just to save a few dollars on buses. Vivian was scribbling numbers in the margins of her timeline. Speaking of budget, I should mention that June weddings typically require booking vendors 12 to 18 months in advance. Since we're working with a shorter timeline, several premium vendors are charging rush fees. She looked up apologetically. The florist Sandra contacted is adding 20% to their standard package, and the photographer she preferred has a $2,000 expedite charge. How much is the photography package with a rush fee? David asked, his voice carefully neutral. $12,000 for 8 hours of coverage and edited digital gallery. Vivian said this like it was perfectly reasonable. That includes engagement photos and a complimentary bridal session. I watched David do the mental math. $12,000 was more than we'd spent on our car. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Talk to the guys about Atlantic City. Everyone's pumped except David's friend Tom, who's being weird about the timeline. Can you have David call him? We need final headcount for hotel rooms. Then immediately another message. Also Mom wants to know if David's parents are handling the rehearsal dinner or if we need to book that too. The country club has availability the night before but needs confirmation this week. I showed David the messages, watching his face grow darker with each word. Your brother contacted Tom? David's voice was dangerously quiet. Tom was David's oldest friend, a guy who worked 2 jobs to support his disabled sister and definitely couldn't afford a $400 bachelor party weekend he'd never agreed to attend. I'm calling Marcus right now, I said, standing up. No. David's voice stopped me cold. I'm calling him. This stops today. Vivian was watching our exchange with growing alarm, clearly realizing she'd walked into something much more complicated than standard wedding planning family dynamics. Perhaps, she said carefully, we should reschedule this consultation for when everyone's had more time to discuss preferences privately. But my mother was already pulling out her phone, completely oblivious to the tension crackling through our living room. Actually, this is perfect timing, Mom announced brightly. I just got a text from the Ritz events coordinator. They had a last-minute cancellation for March 15th, our original date. We could move everything up and have the wedding in 6 weeks instead of waiting until June. 6 weeks. She wanted to have this fantasy wedding in 6 weeks. David looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between panic and determination. That's it, David said, his voice cutting through my mother's excited chatter about the March date. Everyone stop. The room went dead silent. Vivian's pen froze mid-note, my mother's mouth hung open, and I could hear my own heartbeat in the sudden quiet. David, honey, Mom started, but he held up his hand. No. We're done. He looked directly at my mother, his voice steady but unmistakably final. Sandra, you need to cancel everything. The venues, the vendors, the church, all of it. My mother's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then that familiar indignation. Excuse me? I've spent weeks planning. Planning a wedding we never asked for, I interrupted, finally finding my voice. The words came out stronger than I expected. Mom, we're not getting married at the Ritz-Carlton. We're not having 300 guests. We don't want any of this. Vivian quietly began packing up her portfolio, clearly recognizing this was no longer a business meeting. Jessica, you're being ridiculous, Mom snapped. This is just pre-wedding nerves. Every bride gets overwhelmed. We already planned our wedding, David said calmly. Last weekend, while you were booking shuttle buses and hiring photographers we don't want. We're getting married April 18th in Vermont. 47 guests. Done. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother stared at us like we'd just told her we were joining a circus. Vermont, she whispered. Maple Grove Inn. It's beautiful and quiet and exactly what we want. I felt a strange lightness, like a weight I'd been carrying for years was finally lifting. We already put down a deposit. But the church, the family traditions. I have 17 Pinterest boards. Then use them for Marcus's wedding when he actually gets engaged, David said. This is ours. Vivian cleared her throat diplomatically. I'll just send you my cancellation policy via email. No charge for today's consultation. She gathered her things with practiced efficiency. Congratulations on your upcoming Vermont wedding. It sounds lovely. After Vivian left, my mother stood in our living room looking genuinely lost for the first time I could remember. I was trying to help, she said quietly. I wanted everything to be perfect for you. I know, I said, and I meant it. But your perfect and my perfect are completely different things. My phone started buzzing, Marcus calling, probably wondering why his carefully orchestrated timeline had just imploded. I declined the call. So that's it? Mom's voice was small. You're just going to run off to Vermont and exclude your entire family? David and I exchanged a look. We talked about this during our secret planning sessions, how to handle the aftermath. You're invited, Mom. You and Dad, Marcus, Grandma Rose. But you're invited as guests, not wedding planners. Can you do that? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the cooling coffee and untouched croissants she'd brought as peace offerings. I suppose I don't have much choice, she said finally. Actually, you do. You can choose to be part of our real wedding, or you can keep planning your fantasy wedding without us. I felt surprisingly calm. But we're getting married April 18th with or without you. 2 months later, I walked down a simple aisle between white wooden chairs, wearing a dress I'd chosen myself for under $500. David's eyes were bright with tears as his college roommate Chris, our actual best man, handed him the rings. My mother sat in the front row wearing navy blue instead of the dusty rose she'd planned for months. She cried during our vows, the ones we'd written ourselves without committee input. During the reception, she even danced to the playlist David and I had made together, full of songs that actually meant something to us. Marcus gave a surprisingly heartfelt toast about learning that love isn't about meeting other people's expectations. He'd broken up with Stephanie 2 weeks after our confrontation, apparently planning someone else's engagement had forced him to examine what he actually wanted from his own relationship. At the end of the night, as we said goodbye to our 47 guests, my mother hugged me tight. It was beautiful, sweetheart, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that your dreams matter more than my plans. 6 months later, she started planning Marcus's actual engagement party. The difference was, this time he asked her to.